Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the upcoming Supreme Court decisions is Len Carter. Len is an experienced investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Welcome back to my precious listeners, the real voices of wisdom. You send me clips and comments and criticisms that really make me wiser and enlighten me on many issues that I am interested in and can be influenced, and I'm influenced by your insights and suggestions. So if it's Wednesday evening at 6:30, I love being back with you, and I appreciate all that you contribute to my wisdom and through me to the rest of our audience. Today we have a brilliant cohort, Len Carter, who really is very bright. He was number one in his class at Harvard Business School, top of his class, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to benefit from his insights and wisdom. So thank God that he was able to join us, and I think we should have an interesting, if not always agreeable, session. So why don't we start with one of the significant, or more than even significant, one of the major issues that the Supreme Court's about to give its decision on is affirmative action. In other words, Harvard is taking in people that are less qualified, primarily African Americans, and perhaps in some cases what's his name? One said he speaks Latin because he went to South America. One of the top politicians. The Hispanics, not the Latins, the Hispanics. Some Hispanics are given special benefits in the sense that they may have a lower qualification to be accepted than some Asian students. That seems to be the issue. And the Asian students that aren't getting in, even though they have a better track record, a better scholastic record, and should be the ones getting in, are deprived of, since these institutions have a limited capacity, they can only take in so many. When they take in people under affirmative action, be they African Americans or others, then these Asians who tend to be very studious, their parents and their culture insists that they study, they learn, very much like the Jewish population, which stresses studying and learning, and likewise has, in general, higher scholastic performance. And it's really a very, very important issue because we want to get diversity. We want to lift up those that are capable but don't have the same start in life. and should be given, if we can, a leg up. But we shouldn't, therefore, deprive the Asians or those that qualified. So it's a very, very controversial and confrontational issue. I'll give you my view, and then I can have Len suggest what he thinks. My view is that it's unfair to deprive those with a better record from attending Harvard or North Carolina or whichever university. But in that process, you're depriving many qualified or certainly future assets of this country that wouldn't have access to this education absent affirmative action. So my resolution of that issue would be, if somebody indicates, if some African American indicates that he or she may have the qualities but hasn't been adequately prepared because of the schools they attended to, the bias of the neighborhood schools that they were in. It's clear that the wealthiest neighborhoods have the best schools because they pay the highest, they have the most expensive homes, they pay the highest property taxes, and they can afford the better schools. So they don't get the same start in life or the same continuing education. So my approach would be that if some of African Americans or Hispanics or whoever demonstrates the qualities based on recommendations from their teachers or indications that in the last year or two of their high school performance, they really demonstrated that they could do the work at a high level, then I would say we should give them a leg up by making another year or 2 years, whatever it takes, of intensive education, of smaller group education, to prepare them and then have them take whatever tests are necessary or whatever grades they demonstrate in that 1 year or 2 year, and then they'd be able to get in on the basis of their merit. You know, we don't let people get into the National Basketball League that don't earn it on merit. You know, we'd like to make it more. There's very few whites and white players in the NBA, National Basketball Association, and these guys that do succeed make millions of dollars, and in some cases tens of millions of dollars every year. And everybody would like to get in, and they play basketball, and some of them have good college performance, but not as good as the best. So we have to do the same thing in life. If you have a job, you get promoted, I assume, based on merit. If a company just did it on the basis of your color or your ethnicity, I don't think they'd be successful. So that's my posture on this issue. Len, what do you think?
Well, thanks for having me here, Morty. I want to push back on one thing you said earlier when you were describing the people that didn't get in to Harvard as a result of their admissions policies as people who should have gotten in.
Right.
So I think the question is, you know, what like when Clinton said it depends what is, here it's a question of what should be. Because I think the argument that colleges use is that they have a different metric for what means or how they define who should get in. And it's not just academic performance. And I would ask this question, suppose it were, suppose Harvard or any other school for that matter says, all right, tomorrow we are going to admit people solely based on their standardized test scores or their grade point averages. We're not going to look at anything else. We're not going to look at whether they have other unique qualities, like they're a musician or an artist or nothing else. We're just going to say our metric for admission is this, academics. And so people come in, they get all the applicants, they rank by score, and they just take the top 100, or in Harvard's case, let's say the class is a couple of thousand kids that they accept. We just take the top 1,000, and those are the ones we get in. If it turns out, in looking at those 1,000, that they're all Asian, or they're all white, or they're all one thing, how does that benefit the university? Because I would argue that there is a value to having some diversity in a university setting, so that people are exposed to other things and different things, and not just people who scored well on a test. So to base your decision of admission more holistically, I think that's where this issue of discrimination comes in. Is it discrimination to admit a kid because he's a good musician, but maybe not as good academic, and deny admission to someone who is a great academic, but everyone else in the class is like that? I don't think that serves the university well, and so I think they have a prerogative to make that decision based on the desire to have a well-rounded class. And that may not be the case if they just limit their decision to one metric.
I don't disagree with that, but then they should articulate and develop that kind of criteria so people could know how to work to get in. For example, I'll go back to the National Basketball Association, because that's strictly on merit.
And it should be. That's what
right.
Because in the NBA, the criteria for a good team are people who can put the ball in the hoop. For a college, the criteria for a good college, I would argue, is not necessarily limited to only academic, but also prior life experiences and perspectives that different people bring to the university from different backgrounds, even if some of those different backgrounds are kids, applicants who didn't score as well academically.
Well, the NBA...
So I think it's different. I think it's different than the NBA.
No, it's not, because the NBA has criteria that some people aren't terrific scorers, but they're terrific defensemen. And some are guards and they know how to pass the ball and get a lot of assists. So they have different criteria. But unless they're top in that criteria, and it's very compelling, they won't get in. And they have a way to resolve that. If they didn't do that well starred that well in college, they can work for, they can continue playing for some lesser league, and if they perform there, they can still make it into the majors, so I'm suggesting the same thing. Even if they don't get in, we shouldn't deprive them of the opportunity to get in, but it helped them to meet whatever criteria are. So if they think being a great musician should be one of the criteria, then they could sort of give some value to that, some number to that, or being a great. They do that, as a matter of fact, for sports, for basketball players or football players. Not so much at the Ivy League schools, but most of the other colleges. If you had a great high school record as a football player or as a tennis player or as a hockey player, even whatever, they'll take you in, even though your scholastic grades wouldn't. So you can make alternative.
So why can't race be one of those considerations, just like how well you can score a goal?
Your color or your ethnicity should not be valued as merit.
But why? But your ability to score a goal is merit, or your ability to play the piano is merit.
That you demonstrated that you excelled at something that took an effort, not something that you were born with as a feature.
But if your goal as a university is to have a heterogeneity of, say, life experiences, because you want different perspectives on issues, that's something you are born with, or something you grew up with.
Well,
that's not something that you
the
work
NBA,
at.
The NBA takes in some players that have had difficult records in terms of their private lives. Some of them have been accused of sexual molestation. Some have been caught with guns. So you're right. I mean, there's no perfect people, and we have to figure out how to, accommodate that segment of society. But it shouldn't be something that is just as when you're taking in African Americans because they're African Americans. They didn't work to be that, and they shouldn't get extra credit for that. If we feel guilty about having African Americans as slaves 200 years ago, we should do something positive for them. And that's what I'm saying, give them extra help, take them back just like, somebody could go back for another 1 year more of college or go to a lesser league and demonstrate that they deserve, that they're qualified. I'm not against that. I'm saying give them a leg up. But the leg up you should give them is better preparation to demonstrate the merit, to meet whatever qualifications the university feels is important.
But if you're saying that the NBA can pick people that it wants to pick based on how it decides are good people to play on NBA teams.
Only on merit.
But the way they choose members based on the criteria that they came up with, which in that case is how well you can play. Why can't a university similarly create its own set of metrics?
Said that. I said they should.
So why? So if
then they should put out those things, but it not.
So
it shouldn't.
So Harvard.
One of the criteria.
But Harvard does. They say that your race does and your life's challenges do play a role in your admission. So why is that? Why can't they do that?
That's not merit.
But you said
it didn't take any effort on the part of the individual to achieve. They want to take in people based on achievement.
No, they don't.
Look, if the NBA wanted to be fair, half the population, more than half, is white, and so if some argue, there should be an more related to the segment of the population. So there's 13% of Americans are African American, then 13% of Harvard students should be accepted. They don't do that, and we don't even complain. We don't. We want to watch a basketball game where the best
But if they,
performers are
but
performing for us.
if they put out what their criteria are, then is it okay? Then you say it's okay.
Yes.
So
Well, criteria that depend not on.
but why does
Not
it
on
have to be?
color or
But that's your criteria. Why can't it be their criteria?
Because it has nothing to do with improving the quality of the education they offer.
They would say it does, because it's
I don't agree with that.
by
I'm
having
saying-
a diverse student body, it does improve all the students' education. But that's there.
The
Anyway,
Harvard Business School, when I went, dropped out 10% of the class. It didn't matter who you were related to. You were the son of a president of a major company, or you were related to the president of the United States. If you didn't meet the criteria, they dropped you out. I know that because one of my classmates that was related to a former secretary of the Treasury, and one of the buildings was named after him. One of the important buildings there on campus was named after his family, and he was a member of the Rockefeller family. He was dropped out because, and so one of my classmates ultimately became the dean of Harvard Business School, and I asked him, do you still drop out 10% of the class? And he says, no, we can't do that anymore. So I said, why? He says, because we take in a lot of students based on affirmative action or based on the desire to have a diversity. They don't say necessarily affirmative education. We want diversity. So I said, well, what do you do if they don't meet the criteria, they don't produce the kind of results that you require or that you expect? He says, well, we do tell them to take a leave of absence, and we make available to them during the summer or even during the next 2 years, whatever, a special coaching, special tutoring. So if they can raise their level, then we take them back in. If they can't, we don't take them back in. And in many cases, they just realize they're not up for it, and they do drop out. But we don't have a policy anymore of dropping 10%.
okay, so putting aside how people are ultimately chosen for school, the next court decision coming out tomorrow probably is whether or not students that went to college should have some or all of their student loans forgiven by the government.
That's a good subject, and first of all, my view of that situation starts well before the specific issue.
But in this case, there's sort of two issues. There's the issue: should student loan debt be forgiven by the government? And more specifically, which is this case, did the president have the right to unilaterally sign an executive order doing so? So there's two issues. First, should they? That was what you're discussing. Your opinion.
If you take Donald Trump's approach, he says the president could do anything he wants. So if you take that approach,
That is
he
true.
certainly has the right. But my view is, first, I want to deal with how they get into this position or condition. I feel many advanced countries have availability to qualified students that they can attend college free. And we're the wealthiest country, without question, in the world, and we don't have anything like that. And and number two, I'm very familiar with this whole issue because I observed people being recruited to get these, that wasn't even degrees, certificates with promises diplomas, with citations that said these students fulfilled these programs, and they promised them if you do that and you pay the fee to get into our programs, you will get a job, you will do better in life, and it turned out that it was a for-profit business. I know one young man that worked at recruiting students, and they didn't care if the student they were recruiting was semi-retarded, and the schools or the institutions that signed them up didn't care what their background was. They said, we will help you get loans so you can. So the government was remiss and really a conspirator in putting these people in a position that should never have gotten the loans for this activity. As a matter of fact, at least 2 or 3 of the major, there was a company, IT&T, that was one of the majors, was locked down, and I don't remember the name of others. But they were just profit centers, and they didn't care if the student, they'd give them a certificate and feel they fulfilled their obligation. But it was, so that these people are stuck with loans that they can't repay because they can't even get jobs. They weren't upgraded in any way. So as I watched, it was the government, just as I watched their home, when they made home loans in 2007 and 2006 and 2008 to unqualified borrowers, because the banks wanted could place those mortgages with others and didn't keep it to themselves. And the rest of the world knows that mortgages are where 20% is put down, rarely were ever foreclosed. But they had such big demand, they provided the down payment. So, if you just make these criteria or these institutions have good sales pitches and nothing else, the government is remiss in allowing those loans. And they recruited a whole entire staffs to arrange the loans for these inept students, for these unqualified, never should have been given these loans. So should they be forgiven? I think since the federal government was compliant in this, in their awful situation, they should be.
And the president has under his executive powers, the right to do that. Because I would say, if splitting the issues into the two parts, first, the easier one, in my view, this case, does President Biden have the right to waive student debt? If I were on the Supreme Court, I would say no.
Okay.
Because the founders, I think, were pretty clear when they drafted the Constitution to limit the power of spending to, there are checks and balances. Only the House can originate spending bills. There's the Senate to confirm it. There's the president to sign it. There's the court to interpret it. But only the House has the right to the purse strings. And so, yes, the president does have certain rights and powers in emergency times, which I think is the argument here. This is an emergency. I would say, nice try, but no. I don't think I think the president constitutionally does not have the right to do this. This is tantamount to spending billions of dollars, and only the Congress, through a legitimate process of a bill and approval and president signing it, I think could be the venue to forgiving student loan. That's the easy decision. The harder one is, should that happen? Should the Congress pass legislation for forgiving student loan? Whether or not the president, I would say, can't do that unilaterally, but should the Congress do that? Should our country do that? That's a much more difficult question. I think that there should be a role by the government to make higher education more affordable, because it is unaffordable to a lot of the country. There is the argument that would say, why is it, if it should be I would argue it should be education and not necessarily college education.
I agree with that. Should be vocational for those that
Which
don't
this,
have the
which
capacity.
this doesn't. So, because in fact, this case is just, and Biden's debt forgiveness, I believe, is limited to certain government loans, Pell Grants and other government loans, which not everyone took and was entitled to get. So there are a lot of people out there who took student loans for whom this doesn't apply. And for them, that seems like it's not really fair, because they have to pay their money back, but this other person doesn't have to pay their money back. And this other person that went to vocational school didn't even get money, let alone pay it back or not. So I think this case is an easy one. But the harder one is how do we address the problem of education?
To your views. First of all, the segment of the American population that owes this money is overwhelmingly those at the very bottom of our society. So you have to ask yourself, was it right for Trump in 2017? Shows you my age. I keep thinking 1917 or 1817, or when I was born in 1717. But anyway, what Trump gave to the segment, the top segment, the top 10%, or even maybe the top 2%, the vast majority of a almost $2 trillion tax cut. They didn't need it. It didn't help the economy, in my view, because if you give Bill Gates an extra $1 million, or any people in that bracket, unless there's some compelling reason to invest it in growth of the gross domestic product or in jobs, which is dictated by demand rather than I have the money, so I'm going to put it in. And there was no upheaval about it. The president did it. The Congress approved it. So why are the little people less entitled to some decent treatment at times? The oil companies get tremendous subsidies, and industry gets tremendous subsidies. Lots of industries are getting subsidies and government help and special tax treatment. And here is a segment of society that really needs it. But whenever it's addressed for the lowest, they have the least voice, they have the least influence in Washington. They're not the big donors to the congressman or to the president. So my view is there's a great deal of justification for waiving what they owe and letting them move on in their lives. In any event, most of them, or many of them, will never pay it because they just can't. They weren't prepared to get a job, and the government should sue the people that took the money, not the students that applied were deceived to apply for these courses and these loans with the promise that it'll change your life, it'll make your life better, which it hasn't. So that's the way I feel. You talk about special treatment. There's a carried interest that everybody says is undeserved for the wealthiest group of money managers, private equity managers. And they get a capital gains treatment on the part of their income that comes from their work, but is because they generated profits for their investors. The investors deserve a special treatment because they took risk. These guys are just managing the money. They have no downside risk, and they have only upside potential. Why do they get? And they're fighting that, and everybody promises we're going to change that, and they just can't, because these are the most powerful contributors to and donors to Washington.
But even if you accept the argument that this debt forgiveness plan benefits the
It should be
lower,
a death forgiveness plan.
benefits
If you die,
the least
if you
wealthy,
die, you should be forgiven.
it still misses some of the least wealthy, which is people who didn't get federal student loans to go to college, but may have not went to vocational school because federal loans weren't available. So in this particular case, you're not even doing what you say, which is benefiting the least wealthy, because you're only benefiting some of the least wealthy.
You mean some wealthy people got Pell Grants?
No, some non-wealthy people don't have debt to forgive because they went to, say, a trade school. You don't get federal student loans to go to a trade school. So they're among the least wealthy, but they're not getting forgiveness. So it seems like it's just not even consistent with what you're saying, that we should benefit the least wealthy. Even if you agree, okay, that's a good thing for society to do.
Yeah, but they weren't aggressively solicited and pursued. They applied and they got the loans maybe, but these people were overwhelmingly aggressively.
Well, but the student loan forgiveness is not just for people who were sold on one of these online.
Overwhelmingly, they were.
But a lot of them are just regular students that got money to go to college.
Any program that the government or in life that is instituted rarely is perfect, and you don't forgo the good for the perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying there aren't people that collect welfare that shouldn't, but you don't cut out all welfare, because you would be cutting out people that are in desperation. And so you overlook that, and if it was abused greatly, then you do modifications. And even in this case, if you find out somebody has got a good job and they're wealthy, then I think you couldn't make them, what do they call it? It should be based on when they say who should get Social Security. I said maybe I shouldn't get it because
A means test?
Means test, yeah, based on means. So if somebody got a good job and
Well, that's how, Biden it looks like he was proposing erasing $10,000 in student loans for those with incomes below $125,000 a year,
right,
or households that earn less than $250 a year.
right,
So he is proposing the means test.
yeah. So if they did well, they don't get forgiven.
Given the Supreme
that's
Court's
reasonable.
complexion these days, how do you think they're going to rule? Right or wrong, how do you think they're going to rule?
The Supreme Court, I would guess they will rule again, because it's like most of Washington and certainly most of the Republicans. If it helps the little people, if it's a tax cut, there's no question they'll support it. If it's a tax increase, they're always against it.
So they're likely
and
to
if
rule.
it's increasing help for those that are the most needy, what did they do when they were dealing with the raising the debt limit? They said, we're spending too much money, and then they gave a program of what should be cut. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all the things that help, food stamps, all the things that help poor people. Not one of them suggested or would consider raising the taxes on the wealthiest. It's just unbelievable
So-
that the bias in favor of those that are the biggest donors and have the most money.
So I would agree, my money's on the court ruling against Harvard and ruling against Biden. Meaning no more affirmative action and
I think you're right.
and no more, and then the student loan forgiveness, no good. That's my guess. So
I-
now,
I
let's
think
say,
you're
so
correct.
let's say you're now one of these students who either did or didn't get student loan forgiveness, but now you,
You said you should give those people a bonus.
so now.
They didn't get the loan, so now you give them
Right,
the loan.
well, here's their bonus. So now they're a graphic artist in Colorado who's designing wedding cakes, and a gay couple comes in and says, we want you to design a wedding cake for us. You don't particularly care for
In
same-sex.
particular, it goes against the religion.
In this case, they're a Christian artist, and it's against their religion for same-sex marriage. Should the government require, now state law
Obligate
actually,
them to.
there's two, I guess the issue is, so there is a law, it's the state law in Colorado says they have to do that. They have to,
If you're open for business,
if you're
you have
open
to-
for business.
You have to accommodate
So the
everybody.
question is,
You can't choose.
I guess the question before the court is that law constitutional? Should the government, through legislation, require businesses to
This is a tough.
serve every,
Len,
and does it, as this plaintiff argued, does it restrict her free speech?
I don't know what free speech has to. They always use free speech. It has nothing to do with free speech. They always throw in that free speech, just like when they want to increase the amount of contributions that corporations could donate to politicians. They said it's free, money is free
Well,
speech.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think she's, the artist is saying, you know, my artistic expression is a form of speech, and you're telling me, the government is telling me,
I have to speak
what
a certain way.
or not.
Yeah. I guess. you
So
know,
broadly speaking,
if you stretch, yeah, if you stretch
that's
it,
how
then,
that,
yeah.
that's what they're, that's the line. But
I-
the question before the court is, what should they do?
I would
Should
have a
is
very
that
hard
right?
time deciding this issue because I sympathize with the people who are very religious, who feel they just can't do this. That it makes them throw up. It makes them sick, and so they shouldn't be forced to do something that is against their religion. On the other hand, you know, should we force them to accommodate these, these supposedly decent people?
But suppose your religion says you can't hire women. That's,
I don't think there's any
no, but
religion that
there
does
may
that.
not be, but there's freedom of religion, so you could have a religion that said that. If you did, there's employment discrimination laws that prohibit discrimination by
Right.
sex. Then what do you do?
I would be against something like that.
So here, it's okay for you to follow your religion because you don't want to do a cake.
No,
But there, it's not okay to follow your religion because you don't want to hire women.
I think there's alternatives. Usually, I mean, it's just the only place in the world that these people can come to get their cake decorated, and maybe it is. But I don't think, we don't believe in forcing people. We didn't force them to take vaccinations that were good for them. So why should we force people to violate their religious beliefs? I told you this was a tough one for me because I also would like to accommodate the gays and the LGBTQ Q or something, because in most cases they're very decent people, and how they turned out that way, I don't know if it's biological or psychological or nurtured or, but you know, they're still decent people. Most of the gays that I know, or even, I don't know any transgenders, but I assume that they're decent people, so they should have availability of everything that everybody else has. But by the same token, to impose something that's so alien and so turns off these people to provide a service.
Yeah, I think the problem is the slippery slope, because you know, you start with, all right, your religion forbids pandering to same-sex couples, but what happens if your religion doesn't, you know, respect blacks or Muslims or Jews or any other group? You know, there I would say there's reason why there's anti-discrimination and laws that say you can't do that, even if it's against your religion. If your religion says I hate Jews, you can't discriminate against someone, because even if your religion says that, you know,
Is there a religion that says that? I don't think that.
That's the slippery slope, though.
I don't think that.
But
there may be people in the religion that feel that way, but I don't think.
But you could.
There's any religion that advocates
it opens
that.
up the door for all sorts of discriminatory practices under the guise of religion. That's the problem. Now, at one point I was thinking, well, it's a private business. It's not the government, right? So it's a private business. It's like a private country club. Private country clubs are allowed to discriminate against members.
Are they?
Yes.
So,
there's no, you know, and so.
I agree with Groucho Marx.
Yeah, you wouldn't be a member of any club that would have you as a member.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would accept me as a member, right?
So, you know, on one hand, you could say, let them do what they want, and then like a what's his name from Chicago, Friedman, would say that the market, the invisible hand, or the market would take care of that. Meaning, customers would say, oh, if you're behaving that way as a business, I don't want anything to do with you, a la Budweiser, and I'm going to boycott your entire cake business until you change your behavior to what the world thinks is the right behavior. And in that way, it's sort of a dynamic, you know, the equilibrium's reached, because society will make it happen. You don't need laws to make behavior change. It'll just happen through society pressures, through the economics of the business. But
you bring up an interesting concept, because, you know, people like Friedman, who was brilliant, and I liked much of his economic teachings and theory, but this idea that the free market or the invisible hand solves, you know, leave it alone, it will solve everything, it will correct everything. The truth is, it's often so invisible that it doesn't intrude on behavior. So, in addition to the invisible hand, we have to have some regulations or some imposition. And the free market can be very abusive and very unfair. So we have to, you know, I'm in favor of free market, but at some juncture, it's an obligation of the government, of the federal government, to interfere with the free market. If somebody, as some pharmaceutical company might be doing, raping the public, where the person desperately needs some drug, and they know that, the pharmaceutical company, and they're just raising the price arbitrarily. The free market clearly hasn't dealt with that. And as a matter of fact, in all of medicine, the free market is very inept, because nobody gets a quote when they go to the hospital before they get a treatment. When you come in and you're desperate to get the doctor's help. You don't say, could you tell me how much it's going to cost? Or they don't even know, for one, what they're going to charge. And two, you're not going to go around shopping while your life may be at stake, you know? So there's no easy answer to many of these questions, even though the capitalism and free market and the invisible hand is so far the best of all methods. It still lacks a lot, leaves a lot room for abuse and for mistreatment and for worse.
I think it's an easy one
Corruption.
to put odds on how the court's going to rule on this one.
Which one are we talking about now?
The gay rights in Colorado. Will the court require the woman to make the wedding
I don't
cake?
think so.
Absolutely never.
Even though they're very strongly religious.
That's why. Because they're not going to.
Oh.
They're going to say.
Yeah, right.
Her
You can't
religion
violate
is-
their religious
Right.
beliefs.
Yeah. So I think that one. That's how that one's going to come out. The last one before we.
That's a perennial issue. I mean, you know, there's the argument the Muslims want to wear face coverings, and they say, well, you know, well, we can't identify you.
Well,
can't.
this one is easy because the court's Christian, and their vote supporting a Christian. The harder one would be that one. How would this court come down on a case where a Muslim wants to wear some religious garment, and how does the Christian court rule on a Muslim right? That's a good one. I don't know how
Over
they
the
would do
years, they've dealt with this. I'm not sure if it's universal, but there used to be laws that you can't open a business on Sundays. And I think now they've ruled that you can.
that. Yes, certain
And
states.
also, people that wouldn't work on Saturday, like the Jewish faith or other faiths that practice their religion on Saturday, I think they've now ruled that the company has to.
Well, that's the
give them-
last. That's the last case here that we're going to talk about. A Christian mail carrier refused to work on Sundays when he was required to deliver Amazon
A
packages.
lot of them refuse to work any day, so why are they biasing Sunday?
So the question is, do
you
the
force
businesses
them?
have to accommodate those practices?
You know, as long as they're not abused. The question is, if people found out that if you claim you're religious and you shouldn't work on Sunday, we'd probably have nobody to show up on Sundays. I don't know. That's a tough one.
I mean, it's a private business. You don't have to
The
work
US
there.
Post- the
No,
US
it was a.
It's not a private business. U.S. Postal
Well, I guess, I'm not sure if this was, they're delivering Amazon packages,
on
maybe
Sunday. Yeah.
on Sunday. The post office doesn't deliver Amazon on Sunday, so maybe it was a mail carrier. I don't know if that's a U.S.
A
mail
mail
carrier.
carrier means a U.S. postman.
I don't know, I think it was a
They don't call
But why would
somebody
they
who
be
works for
delivering
Amazon a
mail carrier. I don't know. That's just a,
Unless
but
it's
they
a
were
female.
delivering
How about a female?
a female carrier, right, then it would be. So he's required to deliver Amazon packages on a Sunday, so I don't know.
It should
if
be
it-
required because the person he's
But if he-
delivering to
suppose
may
he's-
need it.
Suppose he's working for Amazon. Amazon's a private company. He doesn't have to work at Amazon. If his religious practices conflict with working on at Amazon on a Sunday, then he doesn't have to work there. Why does the government need to force Amazon to accommodate that
Are they
person's?
forcing this?
That's the question,
guy?
is do they have
But
to?
have they forced him, or are they trying to force him? Why did it become an issue?
I think they tried to force him to deliver and he didn't want to,
Okay, I see.
because it's Sunday. So is requiring religious accommodation a violation of church and state, separation of church and state? right? Because you're forcing a private company to accommodate a religious practice where, we're not supposed to, we're supposed to separate religious practices from state practices. So that's a very tough one too. I'm glad I'm not on the Supreme Court.
I haven't thought about it, so I can't.
I think I'm going to take my name out of contention for the next vacancy on the Supreme Court, because this is too hard a job.
You have offhand some instinct about which you would lean towards.
I would say they don't have to accommodate them.
No.
They're not.
As long as he delivers it no later than Monday.
Again, to make themselves a better business and to get more customers and to make more money, they might want to accommodate. See that we in business school looked at a case on business ethics, and the question was,
that's an oxymoron.
It is. It was. Should businesses make decisions based on ethics? And you could skirt the issue, and a lot of people try to skirt the issue by saying you don't have to look at it that way.
It would kill profits.
But they'll say good ethics are good for profits.
Yeah.
So that's how they skirt the issue. So
but businesses' behavior doesn't support that view.
In this case, people could argue, well, Amazon might take the view we can increase our business profit if we accommodate workers, because we'll get better workers, more content workers, and customers will patronize us more because we're good citizens.
Yeah, but the person who's supposed to get the delivery on Sunday, they may lose.
No, but then you hire someone who can deliver on Sunday. And then you try to accommodate that person by switching his schedule around so he gives on Saturday and not Sunday. So it's not a question of forcing, it's a question of accommodating to be a better citizen. How does the court rule? I don't know. I bet
they won't force them.
They may not force them, even though it's a religious. Yeah, they probably will say,
get somebody else.
Too bad on the person. Too bad on the worker.
No, get somebody else.
Right,
yeah.
meaning worker. You're not. You don't have the right to not work on us.
No, I'm saying they will give them off.
Oh, you say
they'll accommodate.
You're saying
that
the court will say you have to accommodate religious practices.
Right.
Oh, we'll see. We got tomorrow.
Because it's not ruining the business. It's not devastating. If it was a mess, if thousands of people requested it, then I think you would,
even though, originalists would look at the Constitution and say, see the word separation of church and state, and not, and not, I don't know. They see what they want to see. People see what they want to see.
That's why it's nonsensical. I would say this, in my view, at least every 50 years, they should have a constitutional convention and upgrade or review the validity of the Constitution, or modify it.
We don't even have to wait 50
it.
years. I mean, it can be modified anytime.
No, but I'm saying
it's just hard.
It should be automatic at least every 50 years. You could do it, you could do it.
But okay, so let's say they had a convention every 50 years. Yeah. You'd still need to have rules on what has to happen to make changes. Like, you need 3/4 of the states.
Yes, There would have to be,
So you're saying the rules should be
there would have to be
easier.
a structure.
But there is a
of
structure.
of who attends that constitution.
Let's say every state attended.
Every state sends an attendant,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the way it
would
works
be,
now
would
is,
be like the evolution of the
but
Constitution originally.
but right now you need 3/4 of the states to approve a change in the Constitution.
I don't like that.
So,
I'm saying it should be the way the Constitution was originally evolved. I don't think there was universal agreement on everything.
well, there isn't. They're not saying there has to be 3/4.
Yeah, but I'm saying.
What's wrong with
who
3/4?
Who picked 3/4?
That's when they wrote it that way. You think
I'm
it should
saying,
be
but
lower? What should it be?
It should be whatever we could evolve as a Congress, as a Senate, as all the governors, whatever, you know. we
But
make
there has to be some threshold.
Yes, I'm saying.
Majority,
I'm
2/3,
I'm saying
3/4.
maybe you, what do you call it? You poll all of the 50 state governors, or you poll one senator from every state, and those they would make should it be 60%? Should be. It's always arbitrary because some votes in the Senate are 60%, some are majority, some you filibuster and it's no number, you know. But I'm saying, even the Bible, the Torah that the Jewish people follow, and it's supposed to be, it's handed under their beliefs, under God gave it directly to the people, so it should be unchangeable. And over time, the Sanhedrin, a meeting of the top rabbis, council, can modify rules, and so even though it says an eye for an eye, we've found a way.
I don't think the problem is I think the structure to change the Constitution is a good one. That's not the problem. The problem is that the people in the states, that 3/4 of which have to approve, don't have the backbone and the gumption to stand up to make the changes.
Well, that's
the
problem.
problem. And that getting
if
3/4 of the
but
states
if you had it,
shouldn't be a
if you
problem
had it
because
automatic every 50 years, maybe they would have a different attitude. Because people would bring up, say, on gun control.
maybe it should be. It should be.
It says under a militia, under a well-organized militia, so they could say, you know, we can have gun control. Right now, it's whatever.
But we should meet the test
Of what?
of 3/4 and a supermajority if the states and the Congress reflected.
Why not 60%?
No, but
What's only about 3/4?
nothing. But we should meet that because 3/4 of the people in the country do want
Okay.
gun control. That's
But
not
again,
the problem.
it may
It's
be
not the
that-
3/4
it may
that's the
be that-
problem. Is that the
may be
legislatures aren't doing their
it
job
may-
by reflecting what the people
may-
that they govern want.
Right,
that's
true
the
too.
problem.
But it may be that 2/3 is enough, or 60%. Yeah, because when you make it 3/4, that's a high mark to.
But with gun control, it shows you it doesn't matter what the mark is, because we meet the mark, and it still doesn't get done.
No, but these wouldn't be elected officials per se.
Well, that I don't. I mean, I think it should be elected officials, because then you're putting too much in the hands of non-elected officials. Who would it be then? It's not governors are elected. Who would it be?
No, you're right. I said it would be.
They just have to
one
do what they're
senator-
elected to do,
one
and they
senator,
don't. That's
right.
the problem.
One senator from each.
They don't do what they're elected to do,
Yeah.
because they're too biased and swayed by whatever,
The attitude might
lobbyists
be
and
different
donors and
if-
everyone else.
If it was if it was compelling activity that they had to do every 50 years, maybe they would have a different approach.
Or maybe, you do what states do for certain things. You have referendums. Like
Yeah.
you have a countrywide referendum on something. That would be interesting. That's more of a pure democracy
Yeah,
approach.
that would be, yeah. Why don't they have that?
Because when
too
they set it
onerous,
up, they
too
never
difficult.
trusted the people to make. That was the whole idea. Truly, that's why this electoral
No, you're
college.
taking away the power from
You don't want the
from the
people.
guys in Washington.
Right, and you don't want the people to have the power because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
I mean, that's why they originally set that up.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for having me here. Looks like we're
Have we
about
finished?
out of time. Yes.
Anyway, thank you for joining us. I look forward to being back with you a week from now. In the meantime, I wish every single one of you, every single day of your life should be better than the day before until you're 120. Then we'll negotiate for more. God bless you. I love you. Have a great week. Bye.